and only 11 minutes late. Sorry about that. Thank you all for your patience, and welcome to Another Words. So this is our little weekly show where we get together and talk about what's happening in real estate. It's wonderful to see you all. Our panelists this week are down south in Texas, Lee York, and we've got the double attack from the New England area with Jody O'Brien and Kevin Sears, our very special guest. Welcome, everybody. I'm Evan Fuchs. I'm coming at you from Bullhead City, Arizona. Our word today is disrupt, and we're going to throw it over to Kevin, who probably doesn't need an introduction, but there's a lot to say about this guy. He's a second-generation realtor coming out of Springfield, Massachusetts, where since the early 90s, been in real estate, does a ton of work with associations, state, local, national level. He was a liaison. Last year, our VP for NAR a few years ago, lots of work with the Realtor Party. Kevin, you're doing good work, and we are happy to have you here, my friend.
Thank you very much, Evan. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm thrilled to be here with Lee and Jody, and I know Brent is out there somewhere, so just thrilled to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, Brent is on assignment. He told us that if he was on this show, that he was going to take the voice of the contrarian, and he got like kind of biblical about it. So I know he has opinions on this.
So we kicked him off, right?
Right. We said, yeah, get in the chat room, and we'll see you there. Yeah. Hey, Brent. Yeah. But to start us off, Kevin, how are you feeling about that word disrupt? That's not a new word. It's been a buzzword for a long time. But how are you feeling about it in today's situation?
Well, thanks for the question. I appreciate it. So one of the things I try to do when I'm given a topic to talk about is I research it. And so I looked up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary what the word disrupt means. And it means to interrupt the normal course. Over the last few years, we've certainly been able to play buzzword bingo with the word disruption in our industry. And when I heard people say it, it sometimes nagged at me because they were giving it a negative connotation. I think of the opportunity created through disruption, through change, through steering away from the normal way that's done. And if you look at our industry today, I think we're better because of the technological advances and the different business models that came about over the last few years where this word really became popular. With regards to today, this certainly has, the pandemic, COVID-19, has disrupted the way that we can operate and do our jobs. But it doesn't mean that we can't continue to work and improve and do things better. And I think at the end of this state of emergency, the pandemic, we will be even better at what we do than we were before. And when you think about to change, I think about the word adapt. And so if I'm going to look for a word that's synonymous to disrupt, it's adapt. And we can either go the way of the dodo bird, or we can adapt and be better for it.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on the adapt thing. I think that's sort of like it happens to you. Something happens to you. That's the whole idea with disrupt, right? And then are you able to adapt, change, or are you stuck in your ways, or head buried in the sand, or any of those? I saw the author Scott Stratton from, I think he did like the Unbranding series.
Yep.
A couple months ago, and at the time he said disruption is just innovation when it happens to you. And I thought that was kind of a clever way of looking at it, but it can happen to you, you can happen to somebody else, but it's just this idea that it was this shakeup, right? Lee, how do you feel about disrupting right now? Are you disrupted?
Well, unlike some of Kevin's friends, I always thought of disruption as something positive because I like change and I think that it brings growth. And so I was positive about disruption itself, though I wasn't really on board with the way we've been using the word. And as I was telling you, I was having a conversation earlier with a friend, and she kind of summed up my thoughts perfectly, and I want to give her credit for that. It was Mabel Guzman. She said, before COVID-19, we were using disrupt when we usually should have just been saying competition. COVID-19, that's disruption. What we were calling disruption was just competition. So I think that summed it up really well. I wanted to give her credit for that. So
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Jody, do you agree? Is it, how do you differentiate, say, competition from disruption?
Well, one of the things we mentioned last week that I think bears repeating this week is we actually filmed this word for our web show
Right.
before all this had, and we didn't quote unquote, we didn't air any of them because we were trying to get a number of these things sort of in the can as we speak. And I'm guessing we will kind of air these kind of side by side to go through what is really the difference between these two sort of states of affairs from that. And one of the things, in Kevin's definition, he said that it says that you're going to interrupt, but I think people had the belief disruption was interfering, right? Which is an entirely more negative word than interrupt. And I would say that even right now, we should look at the fact that our business has been interrupted, not necessarily interfered with, not stopped, not not ultimately changed. We're just going to, and I know, because here's another thing, Brent, it's a good thing he's not here to actually hear me say this, because this is one of the words he doesn't really care for either, and I'm kind of with him on that, but it's going to require us to pivot, right? We're going to come out and in essence do a slightly changed perspective on how we are. And if that's disruption, then I think that's life. I think that we are constantly going through change and interruption in a new pattern from that. And that is something we should always be planning for.
Well, I mean, it's either change or stay the same, right? Those are kind of the two options. So as how do you change? Like this thing that, it wasn't a market force. It wasn't anything anybody did. This outside force just kind of hit the pause button for us. And meanwhile, it shakes everything up. And you're going, okay, well, adapt, change, whatever. So what do you do? Like, Kevin, what are you thinking about right now?
Well, what I'm thinking about is the disruption over the last few years, and even this, it's not a seismic shift. It's just you're going to have to do things a little differently. I'm still talking with buyers and sellers. I'm still preparing contracts. I'm still doing showings. I'm still leasing apartments. It's just under new rules. And so the more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm still offering the fundamental services that my clients expect me to. And because of the environment we're in, I feel I'm going above and beyond in order to accomplish the goals that previously I might not have done because I didn't have to. So somebody else changed the rules on us, and now we have to. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I think that the listeners out there, our members, practitioners, they can show their value even more now than ever before, because I think the cream will rise to the top when the pandemic is done and regulations and state of emergencies are relaxed.
Kevin, I'm curious as to what your father thinks of this, the real Mr. Sears, as I call him, not just Kevin O'Brien. Because, I mean, in the 50s, is that when he started the brokerage?
So our brokerage, he started it in the late 60s.
So he's been through more than one up and down, more than one change or pivot or disruption, whatever you call. What's his take on all of this right now?
So he came home from Florida 2.5 weeks ago, and we made him quarantine for 2 weeks. And my father is a very social, outgoing person. He loves interacting with people, loves seeing his kids and grandkids, and it pained him to be stuck at home. Not because he didn't want to be there with my mom, but because that's not how he is used to operating. He has concerns. There's no doubt about it. And I know different states are handling it different ways. But in Massachusetts, our governor just recently signed a bill to put a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures. And there's certainly some good to that. But there's also some concern because of the way the legislation was lopsided. And we have tenants' rights advocates and social activists announcing the eviction moratorium as a rent holiday. And what they don't understand is that rent will still be due. It's just if you're impacted by COVID-19, yeah, you're going to be protected. And as realtors, practitioners, we get it and we support that. But we have to be there for the property owners as well. And so, and you asked me about my father. We're here in Massachusetts, and he owns investment properties. And as property owner, he was concerned about how we're going to come through this and where are the rents going to be and how is the business going to operate.
Well, I think two of your comments go together really well, because what you were saying before about value, showing value, and you always had to do these things or should be doing these things, but now you're doing them because you have to. So when it comes to these kind of issues with free market versus government, right? And they say, oh, no problem, just put a moratorium, and then say, well, yeah, but what about? That's a perfect spot for a realtor to step in, not only on the advocacy side, but also on the voice of reason, the explaining, the what does it mean, and being kind of like the liaison, the conduit. So I think that's a space for every realtor to fill by understanding these issues. But given all the association stuff that you do, like where are you seeing associations show up right now for the public or realtor while everything's in flux?
So I'm wearing 3 pins today. My C2EX pin, which I'm very happy to have been endorsed. My realtor pin that I got in New Mexico.
I have one of those.
And it's a great. I'm drawing a blank to the rock that's the stone that
Turquoise.
Thank you. And then my RPAC pin. I'm a Golden R Major Investor President Circle member. And RPAC is more important, Realtor Party is more important today than it ever was. When you look at the federal legislation that went through the CARES Act and the bill that was just passed by the Senate yesterday that hopefully the House will take up today or tomorrow, NAR was at the table advocating for not only its members as members and independent contractors, but as small business owners, and to make available funding like never before for independent contractors who are self-employed to be able to take advantage of the resources afforded them by the Congress of the United States is incredible. The Payroll Protection Act for those of us that actually have payrolls, it's a lifesaver, and it's a lifeline to be able to make sure that we get through this trying time and come out still standing at the end of it. And so I've seen all sorts of tremendous advocacy happening to make sure that our members can continue to operate their business and will still be in business at the end of the pandemic.
Ladies, what about you? What are you seeing? Are you seeing who else is stepping up and helping you find your way? I know both of you are doing a lot trying to help others, but who are you looking towards, or who's helping you in these disruptive times?
Well, I think I'm going to take a slightly different approach to political action, as you guys are aware, as my typical approach. I'm a believer in the sort of the grassroots, and that's really being interactive on a much more one-on-one and local level. And that is, the advocacy we do at our own state houses. We call it, on the Hill, just like we do actually in the national level when we would have been in DC next week. And interacting with your congressman, with your senator, and et cetera, so that you really develop a relationship with those people and develop really grassroots advocacy, more than just the big picture. And I think that's every bit as important as, in essence, writing a check to really understand. And I think you really then get to see how well they interact with it. So I've had a tremendous amount of communication from my local congresswoman, and so I think that is really helpful. I will also share with you that I think more so than just NAR and NAR's information they've been giving to us, I've seen a lot of our council step up. So we had Richard on last week and talking about the Residential Real Estate Council and some of the programs they've done. I've been on meetings all week this week with the REBI, the Real Estate Business Institute, in the ways they've stepped up to really help us. But I think without those tools, you can't deal with any interruption, you know, so you can't deal with the disruption. You really need to be able to pivot or change tracks or be able to deal with it. I think you need tools. And so everybody needs to step up and give you tools. And for all of our listeners out there, that means you to the public as well. The public does not and will not know how to deal with this in relationship to housing if we don't give them the tools to do that.
So what happens? Everybody's like going along, doing their business. You know, things are good. The Mother Nature hits the pause button on everything. There's this big disruption. We change, we find our new ways, and then somehow we shake out like a new normal. And then what happens? What happens to all the disrupting? Does everybody just like reset, leave? What happens?
I got this. I think that this disruption, change, all the greatest innovations in our industry have 99% of the time been consumer driven. As a group, we're not great to say, oh, we need to change our business model. Let's do something different. We don't ever do it until the consumer starts demanding it. And I think prior to COVID-19, there were a lot of consumers out there that wanted to do things differently and to do things more virtually. And now, as an industry, we're making ourselves do those things that they were already asking for. So I think when we come out of this, some will go back to the old way of doing things. And for their consumers that want to do it that way, they'll be the perfect fit. A lot of us will be able to apply and use some of these new skills with our consumers. But however we're doing business, I'm hoping that more than ever, it will be consumer driven. It's what they want, it goes back to, instead of the golden rule, doing the platinum rule, right? Don't treat me how you want to be treated me, treat me how I want to be treated, right? So I think it's all consumer driven. At least I want it to be. Let's respond to them.
Yeah, well, you know, and you made me think of Joe Round's book, Disruptors, Discounters, and Doubters, where he talks about the fact that the real estate industry was not consumer-centric for such a long time and kind of missing the boat there. Yeah. What are you guys seeing changes that are happening right now, like real time, that you feel are going to stick whenever people are allowed to go back outside? Like,
I think virtual showings are going to become even more a part of our business. You know, there were definitely people that were doing it before the pandemic, but with the restrictions, stay-at-home orders that are put in place, whether real estate is essential or not essential, just all the different things at play, the way that showings have been able to continue to happen, especially using virtual methods, I think the consumers, and to Lee's point, I think the consumers will demand that even more out of us because they realize we can do it that way.
I'm going to add to that one other one that I think is really going to drastically change, and that is the bricks and mortar of the industry. There's a disruption that was just on the precipice, I think, that really wanted to interrupt how we did business. It was attacking from all sorts of ways, from empty offices to brokers struggling with communication because they weren't in the offices, to the cost of our bricks and mortar from that aspect. So I think now that we've discovered we don't need, to the extent we've had at bricks and mortars, we don't need this huge office space in the most expensive Main Street USA location, that agents don't want to be assigned to a physical address. I actually had a broker ask me recently for the interpretation of Massachusetts law. Did he have to assign people and then use that in advertising for the address of someone? Because his agents didn't want to be known as being in their Springfield office as opposed to their Long Meadow office or their Agawam office. I'm using some of Kevin's local towns. And I think the fact of the matter is, I mean, Kevin isn't going to need an office presence in the main street of those towns. Maybe he's going to need an office presence in the industrial section, example, like over where your, the Realtor Association Pioneer Valley is your local association, which is much more of an industrialized area. It is something that's going to drastically change, I think. And that's a disruption that I don't think is new. I think it just couldn't break through and interrupt the normal way we were doing business because we were holding on to those bricks and mortar so tightly.
So Rhett mentioned in the comments that the word or the phrase "new normal," and I was hesitant to use that because that's kind of a cliche sound. I think the point being that this is temporary and we'll be back to the old normal, maybe. But I think the normal is a moving target for now on. Personally, what I feel like is, don't say, well, we just have to get through till April 30th and then things will be back the way they were. I think you're setting yourself up for pain and missing the mark that way. I much prefer the adapting strategy that we were just talking about, where it's like, hey, whatever it is today, I'm fluid, man. I'm going to adapt and I'm going to bring what the consumer needs so that I can exist in today and, plan for tomorrow, but exist and thrive today,
Evan, let me just jump in here. I've got 3 kids. They range in the age from 14 to 19, 2 in high school, 1 in college. They've been home for a month now, being educated at home. And, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only practitioner. I'm not the only realtor that's home part of the time during the day. If I'm not at the office taking care of the business I need to, but I'm home, and what I've been trying to do is take advantage of some of the resources available to me as they are sitting there being educated. I'm letting them see me take advantage of opportunities to educate myself. And I would just encourage the folks watching this, take advantage of the time, be a good example for your kids or grandkids if they're homeschooling, and get some education. I know my state association, my local association has different things available, but so does the National Association of Realtors. They've rolled out the Right Tools Right Now program again, which first came out, I think, in 2009. And they have either free or deeply discounted resources available where you can make yourself better at what you do and take advantage of what might be considered idle time. But it could be invaluable for you when we are out of the pandemic and we figure out what is next.
Yeah, I totally agree. Are you all seeing, taking advantage of anything in that realm as far as like professional development or improving your business, any of that kind of growth stuff right now?
Yeah, I have. I just did 2 more designations because they were 50% off. So why not, right?
Well, look at you.
I know. And then tomorrow I'm teaching a class using Zoom that we've got 450 people registered for. So they're taking advantage of it, right? Of all of education opportunities. So
well, I just want to be clear, like, so everybody realizes you're not talking about a webinar where you're broadcasting to 400 people. You're talking about like an interactive program, right? And that's a great example of what Jody was saying, right? That's not new. That existed before, but suddenly with this shakeup, right? It's here's something that has a bigger place in people's today, whatever that means, and will become more comfortable, and that will probably stick around as things continue to evolve and change, right? Is higher attendance or participation in that kind of a format?
Well,
yeah,
Lee is in Texas, so they do it bigger there. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
It's only 450 people, Lee.
Right.
Well, and that's the thing too. I mean, it's not just like we've been using Zoom for a long time, but now with this, the rules have kind of changed, and we're seeing this in a lot of states, not just Texas. But it used to be that we did the live broadcast because we had such a big area to cover and people had to drive, so far to go to classes. So we would broadcast into a local association and the members there would go into a room and do the broadcast there. So I might have, 20 connections and 150 people. Now it is straight into their home. So it'll actually be, 450 connections. So my point of that was that people are taking advantage of the education and the opportunities, and I'm glad to see that. So, And I know I've said this on almost every week. I've said this, Kevin. I keep saying y'all got to get up and do something, right? Because there's a lot of people that are just paralyzed. They just don't know what to do, so they're not doing anything. And maybe the disruption is interrupt your own paralysis and get up and do something. I think if you go on much longer, I want to be there for you, and if I can help, by all means, reach out. But if you go on much longer paralyzed, then what you need to do is probably go get a job.
Yeah.
Because you can't
if they can,
Right.
in an essential service. And I know in some states real estate hasn't been deemed essential. I was talking with Greg Herb in Pennsylvania and Sarah Lipnitz in Michigan. They can't even go to a vacant property to take photos. They can't do anything.
But they can talk on the phone.
Yes.
There's always something you can do for your business. And I know you know that. I'm not schooling you, Kevin. I know.
Yeah, no.
Well, I'll add on to Lee's challenge of a few weeks ago because I took it up. So when C2EX came out, I watched this whole thing be developed and was all for it, and I logged on and did the first 5 minutes of it, etc. Then I kept saying to Lee, I'm too busy. I'll get to it, but I'm too busy, and maybe that was legitimate, maybe that was not. But Lee challenged us a couple of weeks ago and said, now's the time, people. Get on that site, get your C2EX done. And I would say, because I'm the one who's always speaking to the brokers in the group, remember also that Lee pointed out that if you have a certain amount of your brokerage, and I've forgotten the exact amount, Lee, you can chime in there.
I think it's 80. Is it 80%?
80%.
80%, yeah.
Then, if you're getting your agents doing it, you get 80% of your agents, then you're a C2EX office or company, from that. So there's something that not only you can do, but you can help others do, and we'll all benefit out of that.
By the way, C2EX, big announcement, y'all, breaking news. C2EX broke the 50,000 mark today.
Wow.
Yay!
The 50,000th person started the program. So
It only took a pandemic to get us there.
Well, I feel we were way ahead of where we expected to be on that program anyway. So I'm just glad it's been embraced so well. Evan, would you like to run this show again, or have we just completely wrapped it?
You know what? Actually, I'm enjoying my spectator spot, but I have a counterpoint for Jody. Okay, so somebody commented that with regard to bricks and mortar, saying that speaking for their office, they would welcome the return to a brick and mortar. They can do both, and particularly for new agents, was the comment, and being around one another. And I happen to think it is you can have both. So what about a brick and mortar office that's sustainable, but now picks up the skills to do business virtually that maybe they didn't have or have as well? How are they going to fare, Jody?
So you and the commenter bring up an excellent question that, and again, as I mentioned, this isn't new. The company I was working for in 2005-ish, somewhere 3 to 6, somewhere around there, actually explored reducing their bricks and mortar to really, I'll call them cafe or boutique styles, and expanding in a more centralized location that had focus area groups, one of them being new agents. So if you were hired, no matter where you were hired from, those new agents got assigned to the new agent office. And the new agent office and the new agent manager and the new agent training team all was able to really focus on those people in an in-person interactive way from that. And then, there were other specialties that were explored, such as new construction and, subdivisions and that type of thing. So I think it's a wonderful idea. And obviously, as I said, it didn't go anywhere because we were just so resistant to that being a change or interrupting our normal, right? That we didn't take advantage of it. So I think that's a wonderful way to look back at it, is to look at what will you keep and what will you change about your bricks and mortar.
Right. And that's the beauty of this whole free market thing, right? Getting back to Kevin's point about value, and particularly everybody's reevaluating everything now on the consumer side. I was doing a webinar this morning about managing expenses, and we were talking about that. And so I think everybody has to reprove themselves, and there's going to be this fluidity as people find different value propositions and what they can offer and who that's valuable to. So it's going to be really interesting to see how all that works out. Kevin, are you seeing any other models or approaches emerging or changing, or how do you feel about that?
Well, what I've found very fascinating is over the last month, some of the companies that came into real estate and really came onto the scene and were known as disruptors. I don't know if you've seen this, but how many of them have been saying they're laying off 40%, 50%, 60% of their staff because they need to cut payroll. And so I actually think this is a great opportunity, again, for people that like their business model to promote it and say, listen, I'm going to be here, even during the pandemic, but after the pandemic, and I'm not going to lose, I'm not going to miss the beat because of it. I didn't really answer your question, but that's what I did find fascinating about what I've seen with some of the business models out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair way to answer the question. And with regard to emerging or newer models that are making changes, I respect any company that I don't like people losing their jobs, but I respect companies making the necessary adjustments to keep the people employed that they can and survive as a business as long as it's viable, and it's tough. Those are tough decisions to make. I'm sorry, Jody.
That's okay, Evan. I was just going to mention, because Lee had mentioned it earlier before we went live, and I wanted to make sure that we all had the opportunity to somewhat chat about it. Was a disruption that got disrupted by COVID-19, and that was what we were referring to as the News Day, or the Long Island Divided in our fair housing. And that's a disruption that doesn't deserve to get disrupted. That deserves our full attention, I think. And I think it has the possibility of actually getting worse under the circumstances. I think our fellow realtors are going to get under a lot of pressure in regards to fair housing, for examples such as how many people they're putting in places, the numbers, the occupancy, where the nationality that people are from, and the sort of medical aspect, which could cross over to handicap. So I think we got to have a lot of issues in that. And I know Lee wanted to speak to it as well.
Well, the first thing I would say real quick, just in case not everyone that's watching or listening has heard about this was back in mid to the end of November. Newsday came out with an internet article, and they had spent a lot of time, years in Long Island with multiple trained testers. We know you can work statistics, but guys, this was legit.
Yeah. And
it was very disheartening about our industry and discrimination. And I think that if we try to say, oh, it's a shame that's happening in Long Island, and stick our head in the sands, we're wrong, because it's happening everywhere. In January and February, in traveling and teaching, I was in front of probably close to 500 realtors over that time. And in front of every group, I said, if you've been in the business more than 6 months and you've never seen discrimination in real estate, in our industry, raise your hand. Nobody has raised their hand. We've all seen it. So we've got to address it. And part of that is knowing what it is and being cognizant. A lot of times I think it's so ingrained in the culture that people are doing it without even knowing it. So that's on us. We got to train them. So if they do it, they know what they're doing. But NAR got with the federal government and is working on some things, and they've got a plan. And I think I'd like to let Kevin speak to the plan, because I think he can articulate it better than I can.
Actually, I'll take this one. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
All right. So
Didn't laugh so hard.
Yeah, back in January, early January, NAR's leadership team, led by President Vince Malta, met with Secretary Ben Carson, and they talked about fair housing, and they actually developed a plan. So if you go to nar.realtor, in the search button, type in fair housing action plan. I think that's what it is. I'm just checking now as I'm talking. New fair housing action plan. So type in fair housing action plan, and you'll see what NAR has laid out. I mean, they're using the acronym or the abbreviation ACT, and they want to emphasize accountability, culture change, and training. And it's going to be key to have local and state associations buy into the training, and NAR wants to work closely with them, but also with the real estate commissions. We need to make sure that across the United States that the real estate commissions are making fair housing a priority. And with regards to the COVID-19, the pandemic that we're in, and the way that operating our business has changed, along the lines of what my brother and I shared with our agents about how we wanted them to operate, we pointed out very specifically that we needed them to make sure that they continue to treat everybody the same, because we don't want to fall into any sort of fair housing claims if we're not going to do the same thing for every single customer or client out there. And so the article we actually discussed at one of our staff meetings, and if we can't use this as a way to train our agents, practitioners out there, then we're going to have bigger problems down the road. And it's a great opportunity for us. And I'm glad, Jody and Lee, that you brought this up, because it is a priority for the National Association of Realtors, and it needs to be a priority for every single broker and realtor out there.
And Kevin, that's great information of managers, brokers, team leaders who are kind of at this point where they may be struggling a little about what to do in their virtual staff meetings. That is some great information that's out there that they can now utilize to cover in their virtual trainings.
Yeah, discrimination can happen in all different sorts of ways, and we need to make sure that when utilizing technology that we don't fall into the trap and not treat somebody fairly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think like something you can do immediately is just make sure that you treat everybody the same. On the brokerage level, obviously you have policies in place that help with that, but you can create your own business decisions, your own business policies where like a consistency with systems and how you impose the same kind of questioning or consulting to all your clients, right? That's a real easy way to get started with that. I love the resource that you provided. We dropped that in the comments. C2EX is a great way to spend some time for professional development right now. Before we wrap, is there any other like resources, tips, wisdom, jokes, anything that you want to share before we go? Lee, let's go to you. Jody, I'm coming to you next, and we're going to end with Kevin.
Yeah, so I don't have any great jokes.
Okay.
So my points are: listen to your consumer. They're going to help you through this as much as you're helping them through it, right? So maintain those relationships. Be open to some new stuff. Again, as I say every week, get out there, get off your couch and do something, please. And also, I would like to say that next week, our word is community. And Kevin, you're going to want to watch again because Mabel Guzman is going to join us. So
I love Mabel.
I know she's the greatest. So, though you're running pretty close there. This has been a good meeting, Kevin.
You
So
bet.
that's my tease for next week and my challenge of what to do this week. So
All right. Jody, what say you?
So my challenge, and by the way, I have no jokes either. We've given them all to Brent, and if you're not watching
Yes.
Brent's
Brent did.
jokes on Facebook, they are the funniest things I've ever seen. But my challenge to everyone is to really take that positive spin to disruption and look at the interruption of normal, and look at what interruptions have been good that you've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks, and how will you apply them to your business. And as for broker owners, not only for you, I would encourage you to run that exercise with your agents, and then say, how can I support you in adopting those in the future into your business? Would you like more training? Do you need more tools? What do you need to truly adopt those disruptions into your normal?
I like it. Kevin, we saved this last spot for you, sir.
Wonderful. So for the joke, I guess I'll just say, a realtor walks into a bar. Those were the days. So my challenge for you is before March 13th or whenever your state shut down, think about what you did on those days. Set your alarm. When you wake up in the morning, get out of your pajamas and try and establish a routine where you can get back to doing what you need to do for your business to grow, despite the fact that you might be limited on what you can do, where you can go. But there's no reason that you shouldn't be getting up, setting the example for your kids. If you have kids at home, get out of your pajamas and work towards securing your business and making sure that you have something to grow once the pandemic is over.
Yeah, but that's great advice. Listen, everybody, thank you for letting us disrupt your day. Lee, Jody, Kevin, thank you all for being here. Brent, wherever you are out on assignment, we miss you. We'll see you next week. We'll be back same time next Wednesday at, 3 p.m. Eastern, I believe?
3:12.
No, we're going to work on that.
we're shooting for 3.
But thanks you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye-bye.